All right, everyone. Well, welcome to episode 1 of the Cold Rush podcast. I'm sure you all are as excited as we are. Really quick overview. What can you expect from the Cold Rush? Why did we create this podcast? Excellent questions. I appreciate you all asking. Eric and I put together the Cold Rush to share our experience in B2B and B2C sales and to share our experiences about the ins and outs of sales prospecting and kind of talk a little bit about our journey, share what has worked, what's not worked, and also what's working right now and what's not working right now, and everything in between. So with that, Eric, I'm going to pass things over to you, introduce yourself, and then I can talk a little bit more as I have a tendency to do.
Yeah, love it. I'm super stoked to be doing this, man. I think, first and foremost, we're not experts. The goal of this is to really understand what's going on, what are the best practices, learn from our listeners just as much as, we can teach. But, myself, I've held every position from SDR to head of sales, founder. But my real focus is building the SDR teams, the strategy, the implementation of outbound growth. So I think that perspective and your perspective together are going to give us as close as you can get to a holistic view.
Yeah. No, I love that. And the only thing I'd say is I would go so far as to say I'm an expert at not being an expert, you know?
Absolutely.
I too have kind of a hodgepodge of a background. I've been in B2C sales, was kind of the B2C version of an SDR, B2C version of an AE. Then in the B2B world, have been an SDR, am now an AE. So definitely a very boots on the ground approach from my end, and am really passionate about outbounding. And I'm sure we're definitely gonna dive into all of that throughout not only this episode but future episodes. So super super excited to be starting this with you, man. And yeah, I think it's gonna be good, and we're gonna share our learnings and again what's been effective and what's not been so effective, as we kind of learn along the way.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that takes us to, I think, the outline of today, right? And we're trying to give you a little bit of a sense of innovative outbounding techniques, because let's be honest, it's a really saturated market right now. Two guys who want to sell some stuff got to go out and create a podcast in order in order to do it at this point.
Social selling.
So, you're live and you're seeing the sales in motion. So, yeah, I think let's just jump on in, man.
Let's do it. You want to get to our
Yeah.
first topic?
Yeah. So, this is kind of your softball question here, but I think it's really going to open this up for us. Like, why do you think outbound is so hard?
Yeah. Man, how much time do you have? I feel like outbound is so hard because, and I feel like we're seeing this on LinkedIn. We see this in inboxes for your emails. We see this on your phone. It's really damn noisy. It is so noisy right now. And especially with the rise of AI tools, there's a lot of exciting opportunities, but the bar is just being raised. I
Yep.
was reminiscing with one of my friends over the weekend where I was like, damn, it'd be interesting to step into a time machine and go just back 10 years and be in B2B sales for a week 10 years ago. I would not, because reps had it so easy back then, right? I think it's easy to fall into that and be like, well, it was so much easier at the XYZ point. But I think we can all agree the outbounding landscape has changed. And each time that you go on LinkedIn, you'll see email is dead, cold calling is dead. And I definitely have thoughts on that. But I think that the buyers' expectations have gotten higher. What used to work doesn't necessarily work now and
Mhm.
is not as effective. And that means that you really have to be doing something different to get people's attention.
Mhm.
So I can definitely dive more into this, but I just think, simply put, it's evolving buyer expectations, and that it's just raised so much over the last couple of years.
I would agree, man. And I think it's like it's been a fucking arms race. It's basically, let's make this easier on the sellers, which is let's automate emails. Let's create AI SDRs to do the cold calling. Let's have these, LinkedIn automated sequences that are going out. And, buyers are they're tired of it. And they see a million things come in their inbox. And what has happened is basically we have these spam blockers that Google, Outlook, like all of them are putting these things into place to just stop it at the front. And now you got to be, a technical person as well as just being able to sell stuff. And it's just insanity, man. And I think one of the hardest things, and we'll kind of go through as we go along, how to best use the channel, or let's face it, just what we're trying and what you're trying out there. But the end of the day is like you're stuck to three main channels and it becomes really difficult to stand out. And so hopefully we'll give some insight on some of the things that's worked for us, but I just think it's so difficult today and it's only going to get more difficult. We're too smart and our tools are too automated to really get that level of personalization that's required to sync a buyer. But you touched on a topic that was X is dead, whether it's cold email, cold calling, LinkedIn, whatever, video, you name it. Why does that get under your skin so much?
It's yeah, I love that question. I think it gets under my skin because candidly, it's wrong. Like, I think that saying something is dead, to me at least. I think that anyone who says that, anyone who is completely negating an entire channel of outreach probably just means candidly that it didn't work for them. And I'd be willing to bet two things. One, that they didn't actually try it for very long. And then two, that when they didn't see immediate success, they abandoned it. Now, to be clear, like, I am all for doubling down on what works for you. And then we'll get into like our own experiences of what's worked.
Yeah.
I think that you need to take a broad enough approach though to understand what are you particularly good at. And also to be candid, like if you don't try things enough, I have booked, even though, and again, we'll get into this, it's like I might have one channel that's really strong for me. Let's say that's email.
Mm-hmm.
If some prospects don't, for whatever reason, check their inbox or just don't respond to like vendor emails at all. So if that person is only going to respond to a cold call, you need to be understanding of trying multiple things
Yeah.
because your best channel of selling might not be the best channel of buying for that prospect. And so that's where it's like
Yeah.
just staying curious, I think is so important. And candidly, I just think that most people want instant success, especially in the world of like
Right.
instant gratification,
Right.
and then they abandon things before really trying them.
And I think that's the nail on the head. Every person is different. We like to classify these and say, this bullshit clickbait that says, X is dead. But I think one, you called it out. Maybe you're just not good at it. Two, maybe those types of buyers, right, just don't respond there. If you're selling a sales tool, guess what? Salespeople are going to be on LinkedIn. So maybe LinkedIn is a good channel because they're checking it because they want to get to their prospects. But if you're selling to engineers, they're probably only checking it when they need a new job, right? And
Yeah.
so it's tailoring it to your audience, but then just as you put it, taking it one step further that there are a couple engineers that are out there that are posting a lot. There's more than a couple, right? And so understanding what are those insights, what are those triggers, what are those things that they are putting out there in the world that shows you, like not only does my product work for this person, but perhaps this is the right channel that I should be approaching them at, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love that, man. And I think that that's so important, especially to just be mindful of not only can your product solve someone's potential issues, but being mindful of like, you don't want to be yelling into the wind, right? So you just have to constantly like try and iterate things, right? But you touched on something that I think is really interesting. You mentioned, salespeople are going to be somewhere, engineering people are going to be another place, right? People live in different areas.
Yep.
I'm curious from your perspective, I think in this world of noise,
Mm-hmm.
knowing how to even begin your prospecting efforts is so important. How to select the right prospects is so important. From your perspective, how do you know who you should be reaching out to?
Again, a big question. I think that it all starts with the pre-qualification of finding the right people. And it's just setting your ICP appropriately. And here's kind of the asterisk or the thing here is just because your company has set your ICP, it doesn't mean it's right. Talking about noise, there's signals and there's noise. And we might have a bunch of buyers that come from a random group. And you see a lot of people biting into this, and it's just not who your core folks are going to be. So if you run down that rabbit hole and chase those people just because they're interested, you might not have hit that vein of gold. I got to toss something
You
in there
gotta do it.
for the cold rush. So, it's really identifying who those groups are. And when Clay released, uh, basically had everybody and their mother coming in. Right? People were using it for recruiting. They were using it for, your typical sales stuff that we see today. And they just didn't have super fans except for this, niche of people who are desperate to find this ICP. And so they doubled down on what they offered functionality for the salespeople. And you can see them today. I mean, they're exploding. And so it's understanding that who your super customers are to chase that down the funnel. Now, with your ICP, it could come in a couple different ways. If you have customers, you can do an analysis in there. Let me find those lookalike companies, right? Well, what are the indicators that they're showing? And you can listen to, your customer stories. If you record it on Gong or Chorus or, whatever, going back and trying to find those keywords, understand a little bit more about what they're saying, what they loved, what they hate, and then chase down those customers that are going to have those same problems. You don't have customers, it's a little bit harder, but you got to make assumptions. And you can go the broad strokes, which is, let me understand a company size, a particular industry, right? And drill down into those ways. But again, we're talking about, this wouldn't be a good podcast if we were saying, use those and then you're good to go, because we know that's just not the strategy that's going to get you where you need to be. So it's using things like intent signals, right? And intent based on the company, intent and signals based on the individual personas, and based on that person, right? Going back to the channel to enact on them. If they're posting on LinkedIn, then they might see your LinkedIn message, right? And that could be a good channel to go to. So, I mean, I could go on and on about this, but right now we've been using Clay. I mentioned it here. We've been using Clay a lot to really drill in to understand those folks, using things like, let me find job descriptions that are out there that mention a particular, and for us at Zesty, it's EKS, but find a particular usage, because basically it's a non-starter if they don't have that. So if I can find those job descriptions where you're not going to find that in a database, or if I can scrape socials, or if I can go and find people they allow you to scrape stargazers from GitHub, right? Who are the people that are following, AWS EKS or Kubernetes or Carpenter? These are kind of our buzzwords. How can I drill that in? How can I enrich that? And how can I make a better list? It's not going to be the best. There's going to be plenty of people who have a solution. There's going to be plenty of people who, for one reason or another are just disqualified from this, but it's giving you a better list to start from, that you can then have those discovery conversations to really drill in and see if this is something that would be interesting,
Yeah,
So, I mean, I'm curious though, like, from your perspective, you were at Gong. Well, we met at Unit Q.
true.
Well, I guess Unit Q-esque, you were out before I was. But you've been at different stages of companies. Unit Q, then you went to Gong, and Gong was already kind of a behemoth when you got there. And
Oh
now
yeah.
you're at Numeric. Give a little insight of like, what are you using in order to find those people?
Yeah.
What are your tips and tricks that you're able to dig in? And it could be different at those different levels.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question, and it definitely, in my experience, has depended on the company, the company size in terms of how territories are determined, right? Earlier stage companies, a lot more green field. So I'll describe a little bit of my process there. Separately, at companies like a Gong, very defined territory. So where I really began to understand account tiering and things like that, candidly, was during my time at Gong. I got a really good understanding of, I had a book of roughly, when I first started as an SDR, maybe like 150 accounts, looked through them. Candidly, there's a number that maybe weren't great fits. So call it, for back of the napkin math, like 120 accounts. I needed to make sure that that I knew which accounts to prioritize to make sure that I could hit quota consistently. And so there were two things I did on that front. One is, again, initially when I was at Gong, I was aligned one-to-one with an AE. And so I did talk to my AE to understand from their perspective, hey, what are the accounts that you want to meet most with?
Mhm.
Candidly, with my AE then, and I think he'd be fine with me saying this, and as an AE now, often you want to look for as quick wins as possible, and ideally kind of size of prize. And size of prize, again, depends a lot on the company and how they structure pricing, but whether you do that on like some sort of a usage-based model or a per user model, figuring out where can you get the most bang for your buck from a
Sure.
prospecting perspective.
Sure.
And I essentially took what I learned at Gong and then have now applied that during my time at Numeric. So I understand what makes, I know kind of where have we found the most success with existing customers. I know the industries
Uh-huh.
to prospect into. I know the company, like the employee count. I'm also interested in understanding specific to the accounting side, like where I can back in to what I want to the accounts I want to be prospecting into by
Yep.
looking at what have the accounting teams looked like for those companies that we've been successful with.
Totally. Totally.
And so the goal there is, I think if you're at a larger company, being really honest with yourself when you look at your territory, quickly disqualifying those accounts that aren't going to be driving the needle, and then
Yep.
also spending, I would also argue, like a disproportionately large amount of time on those accounts that could potentially be quick wins, not only in terms of getting in front of, but also those, in each person's book, I would argue that there's maybe, even at the larger companies, there are probably like 5 to 7 companies that are
Mhm.
probably don't belong in your book from a positive perspective, right? Like
Oh.
maybe that team size is a bit larger than is technically like within your territory. You
Uh-huh.
want to make sure to the extent possible that you're able to get in front of those accounts because one of those accounts might be worth 3 to 5x what your regular accounts look like. And if you
100%.
have greenfield, figuring out, okay, where have we had success in our customer base, and then backing into that for your prospecting effort.
Totally agree. And I think you hit on two really good points that kind of I jumped into. One is, almost diversifying your portfolio. You want some quick wins, you want some longer tail deals, and there's never a time that you want to be without, like your pipeline is just going to suffer if you don't have one of those big deals. If you don't have one of those looming and you're kind of getting those smaller ones to fill in the gap and then you hit every time. But if you chase one way or if you chase the other way, you're probably not going to hit your quota. The other thing I wanted to bring up is, to get a little tactical, you were speaking, and we might be jumping ahead of ourselves a little bit, but you were speaking about, these are kind of the things that I was looking for. Were you using any tools? Like what was the best way that you were able to find these and tier these, not more tactical level or a more deep down?
Yeah, really good question. I would say like a lot of people, I definitely use LinkedIn a lot and specifically SalesNav, right? Think that SalesNav to me was, I think Clay is now huge. I think that while Clay is super, super important before Clay was like a big thing, I think a lot of this account research happened in SalesNav, and I still think SalesNav can be super impactful because there are limits to the level of granularity you can drill into, but
Yep.
you are able to look by, if you know that people with certain titles, like at Numeric, I want to be talking to chief accounting officers, controllers, CFOs, things like that.
Yep.
At Gong, I was interested in CROs, VPs of sales, sometimes directors of sales. But I think backing into very specifically, what are the titles of the people I want to be speaking to? What are the industries that I know tend to be most successful for my company? And then if you can start to get really creative by trying to find ways into that account. Again, on SalesNav,
Mhm.
either with things like team link intros or with connections of connections that you may have. And then also separately, I think people underutilize some of the like Boolean search criteria that you
Sure.
can use, right? If there are certain, from an integrations perspective of your company, if you know that if someone has XYZ tech listed somewhere on their profile, search for that tech in there,
Yep.
like within the search perspective, or within the search bar rather, after setting up your broader filters of company or way you're going to get into the account, or the broader like
Mhm.
company size, things like that. And that's where I think you can get as granular as you'd like, but in order to do that, you need to understand from a high level, like where does your company tend to have the most success in terms of closed won deals.
Yep. Yep. I definitely agree. And one of the cool things about LinkedIn is, there's a lot of little hacks that you can do. You mentioned using some of the Boolean searches, like anything like Clay or whatever else. I mean, I was going in and doing job searches.
Uh,
You go in there and you search for the keywords and you'll find some stuff. Do the same on Google Jobs. They've recently changed the format a little bit. I used to get updates for jobs that I might be
mm,
interested interested in that I could chase down. Or built-in was
Mhm.
another good one because you could actually search by company size. And so using all these different little tools, different little hacks, Google Alerts, right? Just to really drill down and find those companies. It's just kind of amazing how hacky you get out there when it comes down to finding the right ones. And you had mentioned there's sometimes when you'll be given a list
Yeah.
and then you're here to tier the list, and sometimes it's just greenfield. And so then it can feel like there's just too many opportunities. There's too many options to go after. And having something set up like these alerts, having something set up that's scraping the website, or you're finding something, really helps you make sense of the overall mess that's going on out there when you just have too many opportunities. And what I think is interesting, especially about like your background, right? Gong at that time, mature product. So as you said, like it's you probably have a little bit more opportunity because you're doing a re-education sale, or you're doing a value sell to what they're actually going through. Maybe you're replacing a competitor, maybe you're doing that. But it's something like numeric. I got to believe you're doing a bit more education on that side. You're calling, accountants out of the blue. And, I'm sure they're using technology here, there, and everywhere, but like to what extent? And a lot of them are probably set in the same software that they've been using since since they got their CPAs. So how do you see that balance, or that difference play out?
Yeah.
And how do you adjust your strategy in order to make that happen?
Yeah. That's a really good question. And I think there's a couple things. One, like what I will say is I think that I think it's easy to like look at reps from big companies and be like, oh, it must be so easy selling like XYZ thing. I think that there are always pros and cons to being at different stages of companies. What I mean by that is like, yes, when I was at Gong, there was a well-defined playbook, and generally speaking, you knew what you needed to do to be successful. With that being said, though, as I mentioned earlier, the opportunity there was much slimmer in terms of you had to really be excellent because the margin for error if
Yeah.
you burned your accounts was very low. So, whereas at an earlier stage company where there maybe isn't as defined of a playbook, there's a lot, there is a lot of green field, which is nice. And I think which a lot of reps at Gong would be like, well, it'd be awesome to have like X thousand accounts to go after,
Right. Right.
which it can be. But by that same token, it's just a different way that you have to approach outbounding, or even like in the midst of deal cycles, there are objections that a Gong will get that
Hmm.
even call it like an earlier stage player in that same space
Right.
wouldn't get, and vice versa. And so I think that you, as an earlier stage company, have a bit more to prove to the market, to potential buyers, because people want to make sure that they are, not only do they want to be excited about what they're buying, but they also
Hmm.
want to de-risk any potential investment, right? And this works like in sales, in recruitment, all that
Yep.
stuff. It's you want to make sure that you are making the right decision. And so I think that I'm saying this to say, I think that there's always going to be pros and cons. And at Gong, you just had a really low margin of error, but you had
Yeah.
a great brand behind you. At earlier stage companies, there's not nearly as much brand behind you, but you have a lot more opportunity. So
Right.
I think that, and now having worked in both places, you've just got to be really thoughtful of what you're hearing prospects tell you and make sure that you're kind of like coming alongside them and giving
Hmm.
them whatever they need to feel comfortable like in your company. Yeah.
Let me put you on the spot, right?
Yes.
What do you enjoy more? Do you like
Ooh.
the educational side, or do you
Yeah.
like the all right, let me re-educate you as to what you think you know about this company, or why
Yeah.
we're better than the competitor that you're using?
Yeah. That's a great question. I'd say I love the opportunity to kind of figure things out. I think people
Yeah.
overuse the term like build a plane as you're flying it, but I think that that can be really, really rewarding to figure out like what works and then it's kind of like maybe this metaphor doesn't make sense, but it's kind of like, working a combination lock in terms of figuring out like
Yep.
what's going to be successful. And then it's like when that last dial sets into place, then you're like, whoa, this is like,
Yeah.
okay, I have seen consistent success with this approach, and then getting a chance to double down on that. Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, I will say that I think you have generally there's more to figure out at earlier stage companies, which I think is really fun. However, I would challenge reps at later stage companies to think, to draw outside the lines a bit and be creative. Like candidly, that's what I did at Gong. That's why I was successful at Gong. And so I think that that doesn't have to be exclusive to earlier stage companies, but generally you get a chance to experience that a bit more at earlier stage companies, which I love. What would you, because you have had the opportunity to kind of embrace both leadership and individual contributor roles at a plethora of companies.
Yeah.
I'm curious where your kind of preference lies and also what you've found. Where have you maybe seen people in later stage companies? Have you ever seen people kind of come up short and maybe over rely on the brand that's behind them, stuff like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, a company I was at called Pulse was, this Series A company. We had a killer SDR team that I was running there, and I forget what it was. It was maybe like 6 months in to me joining. We were considering like our Series B, right? And so it was like, should we go? Should we take, some VC money? And then the company was approached by a few different folks that wanted to be like strategic partners. So couple players came into this space, but Gartner was, this one where we saw our product align pretty well. Like they had this missing piece that they had a product that addressed it. It just didn't do it as well as Pulse did. And they came to us and we, kind of our founders said, yep, like let's go ahead and do this as a strategic partnership. And so we got absorbed into Gartner. So literally going from Series A, like small potatoes to it's probably like a Fortune 50 company, one of the largest in the world. And so I saw that firsthand. And then I'm doing, similar things over at Gartner. And you have this like, who the hell are you from Pulse? Like, what does this do? I don't understand. To all of a sudden, like everyone wanted to talk to Gartner. A lot of the reason I think was because they're like, hey, like if you're talking to our company, can we get reviewed by Gartner? We want to get near Magic Quadrant or whatever, right? So everybody's excited to use it. But I always enjoy the challenge. There's reasons why I've done so many varied things in my career. And often, and I've put this on LinkedIn, like taking a step back in my career, right? The step back. Because it's like I like to solve the problems that are difficult. Because after all, you're going to spend, 40 plus hours a week doing your job. You might as well at least have a little bit of fun with it and I don't know, engage your fucking brain, It's something that is I think really interesting, and the top of funnel is a universal problem that companies like it doesn't matter how much revenue they're pulling in, their ARR, whatever, they always want a better top of funnel. And anyone who's saying otherwise, I think is lying. And so I think finding those puzzle pieces and putting those together, just as I think that was a great analogy, that last click when you're the safe cracker and you pop it open. I mean, it's a rush, man. It's great to understand that. And then you're like, okay, can't believe I'm going to say this, but does it scale?
Yeah, yeah. That's the $1 billion question, right?
Yeah. I think that's a perfect segue actually though to like, we're talking about this like AI noise and people just furiously following the like, okay, let's do something that scales and then let's do it a million times and let's beat our, customers to death and our prospects to death and, just make them hate the entire industry in general. I'd love to get your tactics because you're like, the master at gifting. We'll get there soon, but like, I want to know how you're using those three channels,
Mm.
especially LinkedIn, emails, and cold calls. What is your preference? How are you using them uniquely? What's your personalization? And you might be using some of this AI, but just would love to get your take on this and what's made you successful in these various roles at these various size companies to hit quota.
Yeah, I would say there's a couple things. One, and yes, more than happy to touch on gifting more. I'm a big fan of strategic gifting. Number one, I'll say I think that the best approach is an omni-channel approach. As we touched on earlier, some
Yeah.
people live on their inbox, some people live on their phone, some people live in their LinkedIn inbox or on their LinkedIn feed. And to your point, there's an over focus, I would argue, on scalability right now, where people then are kind of turning off their any sort of creativity in their brain and they're just focusing on like, can I blast 100,000 emails a day as opposed to 50,000 because 100,000 is bigger than 50,000, right? I
Yep.
would argue starting with the things, this is controversial, but argue starting with the things that don't scale
Yep. Yep.
can actually be really impactful. And
Yep.
what I mean by that is, to be clear, I cold call, I email, I hit people up on LinkedIn, but I try to do it in a pretty unique way. One for videos, like if I'm doing
Hmm.
something over email, I think that it can be really helpful to use like a something to help with that, like a Loom or a SenseSpark. And I think you can get really, I think that you would be surprised how few reps are sending things beyond just simple text.
Yeah. Yep.
I have a bubble up email, which includes like a GIF of myself. And I think that there are a lot of really, to your point about like having fun when you work, I think there's like a fun way you can prospect and there's a way that you can like bring some levity into your prospects days. I also think that embracing creativity where you can is so important. And so like I have gotten so many meetings, even over LinkedIn, right? By like connecting with people and then I will record a video on my phone
Hmm.
and say, and I try to make it a little fun. I try to make it a little goofy, but you don't need to do any extra research for it. You can essentially verbalize the same thing that you tell them for your reason for calling, like
Yeah.
if you were to get them on the phone. But just so few people do that. And I try to make it a little fun. Like normally start my emails or start my videos by saying like, hey, Eric, not sure how many videos you get like this, but I figure this was better than a cold call, right? Like at
Yeah.
least I hope it is. By the way, shout out to Catherine Caldwell. She no longer, I don't think she does video training anymore, but she's badass creator on LinkedIn who used to have like a whole video training program that I took that was really helpful. Um, I say that to say, I think embracing creativity in each approach that you're leveraging, whether it's cold call, whether it's email, whether it's LinkedIn, is really important. And for me, I have embraced video both over email and over LinkedIn because so few people do it. And then I think that cold calling, I would say that I am a good cold caller. I am not a great cold caller. I'll be
Yeah.
candid about that. But I think that the best approach is one that leverages each channel. And I'll
Hmm.
also get into this more later, but yeah, I leverage gifting a lot because I think that also not many people do that, or I would say not many people do that well.
Yeah, man. And maybe we'll do like a bonus content or something that, anybody who subscribes to the podcast can get a video that you made back in Unit Q, man. Those were fire. Those were the like Caspian trying to, figure out what's gonna work, what's not. I think it set the stage for like your ghosting video and stuff. But I forget what company it was, but there was one where you were like in the gym and you had the weights and you turned
Yeah,
around and uh, fire, dude. The fact
thank you.
that the fact that not every single person opened that and bought right there, just sent the DocuSign.
It breaks my heart, man.
I love those. Um, on kind of a tactical side, right?
It,
You're sending these out and you made a mention. Are you doing video to the person or to the company? Because I know there's
mhm.
like a back and forth that goes there that says, like again, doing things that scale, things that don't scale. Do you find that personalization directly to that person is that's moving the needle, or it's something like, hey, I have a commercial insight for you
Yeah,
because I'm well researched and something that you can reuse kind of across the organization if you have 3 or 5 people that you're going towards.
yeah, yeah. I would say it's interesting because I've tried both approaches,
Uh-huh.
and I think that the best approach is a blended one. What I mean by that is I now, in the past, I would do company videos related to the company as a whole. I now do videos tailored to the person, but I can use the same insight for anyone at that company. However, I would say that like, and Dale Carnegie writes this in how to
Win
win
friends and
win
influence
friends and
people.
influence
Yeah.
people. Where it's like people's name is the sweetest sound to them. It sounds really obvious, but I do think that there is, rightly or wrongly, people like being spoken to directly. And I also think in the world of AI that if you get something that isn't at like, I would argue personalization is now kind of like the lowest bar.
Yeah.
So I think if you are getting something that is tailored to the company, I'm not saying that it couldn't be successful, but I think that there are going to be a number of people who will just shut this off. And if they feel like that email or that video could be sent to anyone, they don't want it. They're not interested in it.
Yeah.
Right. Now, again, you have to make it relevant. I'm sure we've all seen examples of emails where it just is weird, where it's like, hey, Eric, like, noticed you own a bookcase. As a bookcase owner, no, 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 you know what I mean? And it's like, how does this relate? Like, so thought you'd be interested in like AI running shoes. And it's
Yeah.
like, well, okay, well, how does the bookcase relate? It doesn't make
Yeah.
sense. But I now blend the approaches of I still get the insights for that company, but I tailor it to the person. But I'm curious from your perspective, like you not only do selling, but you get prospected into. So
Mhm.
how, like, talk to me about what was the last, just as we think about like break it through the noise, right? What was the last meeting you took and what did someone do to get a hold of you?
Yeah, that's great. Before I before I do that too, shout out to Dale Carnegie, man. I was like,
The goat.
this is a totally tangential thing, but you brought that up, and I haven't thought about this for a while. I'm such like a weird dork, man. My dad had How to Win Friends and Influence People like on his
Mhm.
bookshelf. He's got
Mhm.
his like, Seven Habits of Highly Successful
Yep.
People, whatever. And he had that there, and I read that when I was like 10, and I still
Whoa.
have that. It's like outlined in pencil, like different things. Like, what does a 10-year-old need for this? I
Gotta
guess I
win
need some
friends, man.
I guess I need some friends.
Never too early for friends.
This book will get me there. Yeah, so getting prospected into, it happens all the time. I'm still the guy who leaves the phone off, like allows unknown numbers to come in, and every once in a while I'll pick it up if I've got some time, and people do different things. They'll answer it and try to give you tips or like whatever. I don't know, man. Unsolicited advice, like it's just cringy to me, right? Like it's
Yeah,
like
fair.
like if you want it, if you want feedback, I'm willing to give it, but like I don't want to be that guy. The one that I responded to, honestly, I love funny stuff. So
Mm.
like people who push the envelope, or who can find something like a nugget, even on my LinkedIn, right? I think the last one I responded to is somebody called out my college where I went, and typically I'm like, that's something that you can find pretty easily.
Mhm.
But they went in and they like looked up a couple of the places and bars and whatever and called out one of those. And this was like pre-Clay where,
Yeah. You were actually doing
they
the
like
research?
drop a pin and then say, like, have you ever been? This was like, a guy had gone, scoured that, looked at it, and it was actually the bar that I had worked as. Funny enough, a bouncer. This guy is a bouncer
Whoa.
in college. And he called that out and he said, this is a great bar. My family actually like lives down in town that was like right nearby. And he's like, I always stop by there for this. And I really respected the work that he put into it. Unfortunately, we like had a competing product and had just re-signed. So,
Mm.
but I took the meeting. And I think it was enough, and just as you said, right? Enough personalization where like I was like, okay, I'll give this a second look, and not too much where I was like, this guy's creepy as hell.
Yeah.
But I think one of the hardest things here is like you're probably going to have a more willing audience for those kind of push the envelope stuff if you're selling into salespeople.
Yep.
Real respect real. They're like, all right, man, like you did the work, you got to this. But it all comes down to realistically thinking about how this is not just going to help the company, because that's one aspect. We can save you, we can do ROI, but giving a value that's going to help that person in particular. And so I think that there's those two things at play where if somebody says to me like, we can save you some money. Cool. If you can come to me and say like, "Hey, I have a couple of case studies where implementing this got the person the promotion because they were able to increase this and, they looked like a freaking genius by putting this into play," like now you might have my attention. If it's truthful and you can back that up with evidence, like now you have something that benefits me personally and benefits my company, and you get money in your pocket. It's kind of a win for everybody. And so finding those kind of grains and putting that out there in a funny or in a, we always talk about pattern disrupt, shocking me out of, oh yeah, I know this is going to be a cold call, to give me that nugget of information. And at the end of the day, you're not trying to get a DocuSign over. You're trying to earn another 30 seconds, another meeting. Just keep somebody's attention, keep their interest enough to get what you want out there.
No, I think that's so important. And that's where I would say, like, I think that capturing prospects' attention is super important. But then, of course, if you've got their attention, you need to be saying something that resonates. And of course, that's
Yep.
where the combination of like creativity and strong research in terms of reason for reaching out, making sure that it's really relevant, doing all that ICP work that we spoke about earlier,
Yep.
that, creativity alone is not enough. And also ICP research nowadays, I would argue, is also not enough. You need some sort of a 1-2 punch, if you will.
Totally, totally. I'm curious. Like we talk about these like standard approaches. You try these different things. Like, and this is actually something every time I've hired an SDR, and back to a point that you had, like trying the stuff that doesn't scale, trying these other things, because there's going to be times when consistency is key. I mean, it's pretty much all the time that like you should be putting stuff out there, right?
Yep.
And if you find something that works, double down on it, chase that down, be A/B testing your messaging, be A/B, right? Just always trying to improve, get 1-2% better every day. But I always like to ask, an SDR or BDR that's joining the team, like, what is the craziest or the most creative approach that you've ever used? So I want to ask you this, right? And it doesn't have to be you. Maybe it's somebody that you know, whatever.
Mm.
But what's the least scalable, crazy stuff that you've done or heard of out there?
Yeah, that I mean, it's a funny question because I have done some pretty crazy stuff. I would say maybe two of the like craziest things I did. One's probably crazier than the other. And then I want to get your thoughts on this. One time I sent golf balls to a prospect that had his face on the golf balls, which I'm big on gifting. Might not have been my best gift because I think some people would love it, some people would hate it. But I still remember this guy didn't respond to any of my emails, anything like that. It was maybe a month after I sent it. I'd been calling this guy, calling this guy, calling this guy. Finally picked it up. He picked up the phone. I was like, hey, it's Caspian. Sent you those golf balls with their face on it. Like, hope I'm not catching you at the worst time humanly possible. And then he just paused and he was like, Caspian, for the golf balls, I give you an A. For your persistence, I give you an A. For not responding earlier, I give myself an F. And like right after, I remember that because it was such honestly, a little bit of a weird way to answer the phone. But right after he said that, I was like, oh, let's go. I know I'm going to get this meeting. And so that was kind of funny. And then I have also separately a couple of times gone in person
Yep.
to a prospect's office and dropped
Yeah.
off a gift or like dropped off cupcakes. And I will say that can go really well or really poorly.
Mhm.
Fortunately for me, it generally went well. One office that I went to, ironically, was closed, so I had to drive down to Palo Alto and then like drop it off at their other office, and then I got a meeting, which was awesome. But I
Yeah.
have heard of people like you got to be really careful if you're delivering the gift. Sometimes people get really shady about that. I think there is a different like connotation if it's like a salesperson versus a delivery driver.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are some of the like kind of more crazy stuff that I've done. But
Totally.
I feel like I mean you know a lot of people. I'm curious if you have heard of anyone doing anything like really out there.
Well, I'm also imagining that guy with the golf balls. He's just like locking eyes with himself as he like
Yeah,
takes that
on the
swing.
exactly. Well, it's just like, would you want to hit it? Like, you probably wouldn't want to hit golf balls of yourself,
Exactly.
right?
He's like, you got this. Yeah. So I'll start with some things that I did, and it's I think again gifting. One of the things that I did was during COVID, we would send stuff to folks, assuming based on age, like you're never going to get it 100% right. That or some of the kind of social aspects that they put out there, checking their Instagram or whatnot, find out if they have like a family or whatever. And so what we would do is we would send the controllers for like an RC car, or actually, no, we would send the RC car and we would be like, hey, just like wanted to get this out there. I bet, like being at home is like a little bit difficult. Would love to send you, the controller if you'll take a meeting and just like
Mm,
give them gifts out there. That's kind of like you know, I swear I'll send it, but here it goes. Can be creepy because that assumes like one, like I know you have some kids.
yeah,
And then number two is like, how'd you get my home address? Right.
yeah,
So it gets a little funky out there. Definitely like mixed results, but got some great meetings out of it. Right. Some people, I mean, a lot of people understand, like, we know that sales has to be done. The numbers in your CRM that used to be direct dial are no longer useful, and we all got to
yep,
use your mobiles now. So it was kind of this incremental, I don't know, step into like dubious privacy things where you're like, okay, like I'm not trying to be creepy. Like it's just, I don't know any other way. Right. And I know like if I think in the past you've used things like Sendoso or whatever that you can kind of like send a gift to them where they can enter their information. So there's
yep.
like a little bit of a, objective third party that's dealing with that. So probably that's the better way to go. But for us, it was just like, can't afford Sendoso, got to be clever. At the time, I was working at a really early stage startup, and you got to be scrappy. Just as you said, you got to do the things that don't scale. All this being said, and the person will know if they're listening who this is, but I just laughing thinking about it. I had a rep, and I'm going to put a disclosure here, like, do not do this.
Go try this at home.
I had a rep, and she would go on Hinge and
Yep.
just connect with people who are the right title. Because I guess, I mean, I've never actually been on Hinge, but I guess you like some people put in their job description or like, their titles, whatever. So she would match with people that were her target. And she would, start the conversation, and she'd be like, "Hey, let's get a meeting." She would do a lot. She would like work on Instagram, whatever, reach out to these folks. And she was definitely a bulldog when it came to getting these meetings. And it was a time where we were really struggling, and she was going through, and she would tell me, and please don't tell me this.
Yeah.
Get the meetings, like I cannot I cannot not know about
Yeah.
this.
You don't endorse that. Yeah.
Yeah, some funny stuff. Not an endorsement. Do not go out and do this. I'm sure it'll really ruin the dating pool out there. That's hard enough. But yeah, really just funny stuff.
It is. Yeah. Admittedly, it is creative. So
And creative as
that's,
hell. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, exactly. Well, we've kind of danced around gifting. You've
Yeah.
mentioned it a little bit.
Yeah.
I feel like if anybody showed up to listen to this, they don't know who the hell I am. They know who Caspian is, and they know he's the
Okay.
gift giving master. So I think we would be doing a disservice to the listeners out there. Give us a little bit of the playbook. Is
Yeah.
there, because there's such a thing as like intrusive gifts. There's such a thing as, faces with golf balls with faces on them. How do you strike that balance of like a good gift to give and like
Yeah.
do you use a platform? Like what's the secret sauce there?
Yeah. No, it's a great question. And yeah, I could talk about gifting for hours, but what I'll say just from a high level, but hopefully some like tactical advice is number one, there are better and worse prospects to give gifts to. Like
Yep.
ideally, the more someone shares about their life online, likely the more receptive they will be to something like a gift. Also, the more information you will have around which you can tailor a gift.
Sure.
Prospects that are bad, to give gifts to are, I'm sure we've all seen them, people who don't have a picture on LinkedIn. Also, sometimes those people who have been like VP of whatever for like 26 years,
Yeah.
probably not a great person to give a gift to. And I would also say, you've sent things to people's home address. I've sent things to people's home address. I've sent it to people's offices. Number one, because I know people might get weirded out by home address. Candidly, it is, and I say this hopefully in a way that is helpful if you ever receive a gift to your home address. It is a lot easier than you would think and really does not require that much sleuthing to find
Yeah.
someone's home address. I think what often is off-putting about sending it to someone's home is they're like, whoa, how did you get this? Candidly, you can find even with free websites
Yep.
within less than 30 seconds what someone's home address is.
Uh,
And again, it's not meant to be creepy, but it is just in a sense of if someone on their LinkedIn lists that they live in Delaware, but their office is in San Francisco,
yep.
you know if you send it to their office, it might get forwarded to them. Awesome if it does. It
Absolutely.
also might not, right? So I think that we just live in a really tough and unique time that you have to be thoughtful with. But that's where I would say step one is
Yeah.
ideally number one, try to find a prospect who shares more about their life on LinkedIn or on social media platforms. Number two is kind of in conjunction with that. Don't limit yourself to LinkedIn. You will find people who have very buttoned up LinkedIns.
Yep.
This happened to me recently. Prospect had a buttoned up LinkedIn, but on their X or their Twitter, whatever we call it nowadays, it was a picture of them like water surfing, right? And water surfing, wakeboarding, sorry,
Great
water
question.
surfing, technical term, water surfing, wakeboarding. And then they like posted that they loved like, I think like the Phoenix Suns, right? Like was their last three
Yeah.
posts were about the Phoenix Suns. So with just a little bit of coloring outside the lines, if you will, I was able to find amazing information to tailor a gift around, right? And
Yeah.
and that's the third piece that I would say is like number one, find a prospect who ideally shares more about their life on LinkedIn or on social media. Number two is draw outside the lines. Don't limit yourself to information listed on LinkedIn. But number three is the more personalized the gift can be, the more impactful it will be. Think, I have heard of like mass Bose headphones campaigns, like mass, again, it's like the super scalable approach.
Drones.
I
Yeah.
don't, yeah, exactly. I don't have anything against Bose headphones or against drones. I think for some people, maybe it's impactful, but I would argue that for a lot of other people, it's not because it's like,
Yeah.
okay, like, AirPods, sure, but why, but that is not, I think that you risk getting people who just take the meeting and aren't actually like interested in actually hearing about your company. I would
Yeah.
argue you can kind of sell your company with the gift that you send. And I don't mean by sending a super bougie gift. I mean by sending a personalized and a thoughtful gift. You show them, hey, I'm not just like these other sales reps. Like I've done my due diligence. And then you couple that like personalized gift with a personalized reason relative to their company for like why you're reaching out. That's a recipe for success. So again, just at a high level, number one, find a prospect who shares, ideally has some level of information about themselves online. Number two, draw outside the lines, don't limit yourself to LinkedIn. And number three, the more personalized the gift, the more impactful it will be. Again, I could talk for hours about like how do you find what a good gift is to send? What do you send? When do you send it? What does follow up look like? All that stuff. But that's my teaser trailer, if you will.
Yeah, that's perfect. And I think we're going to end up doing probably a full episode at some point on gifting and probably a lot of these. But, I guess this is the call out here for the listeners is if there is a topic that you folks are interested in, like, please let us know. We're out here just trying to drop some knowledge, drop some teasers. So if that is an episode that you want us to really dig into, let us know. And then the other thing is like, if you want to find out, I know a couple of those free, home address sites or like whatever the tools are, send us a note because we're happy to share, whatever it is, especially like the free tools out there. The whole point of this is to help our listeners to get up to the level and to have the stack, whether or not them personally or their company can afford it. Right. And so just getting you ahead of that pack and just making you better. I mean, you've sat through at this point decently long podcast. Who knows how long this is going to get cut to, but like you've listened enough to want to learn. And so, we want to empower you with anything that we possibly can to make you better. So let us know what you want to hear, what you want to know, and we'll be sure to respond to you and kind of give you those tools that have made us successful in what we do.
Yeah.
Uh,
Um,
yeah, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say in that vein, I know like in terms of providing kind of actionable insights and like actionable takeaways. I know this is kind of our inaugural episode, but
Mhm.
something that I think is going to be a recurring segment, if you will, is going to be plays of the week. What's working
Yep.
right now? What is being successful for each of us? And I'd love to hear from you, man. Yeah, what's the TLDR on what is working for you and your team as it pertains to
Yeah. I mean, so like I said, we actually maybe I was late to the game, maybe I was early. I don't know where I land on this, but we have been using clay a lot. And, I feel like clay books come out every week and I'm trying each and every one of these. And one of the things that we are trying right now is so downloading the connections at the company. So the leaders connections. And the key here is finding the leaders who are probably not sales leaders because a lot of those folks have just ruined their LinkedIn. I know I've ruined my LinkedIn just prospecting everybody and their mother, adding every single connection possible so that I don't have to send an in-mail because an in-mail is just not going to work. It's kind of this descending thing, but finding, your CFO, whatever the case is, downloading those LinkedIn connections. And if you want to know how to do it, I mean, just Google it or feel free to ask us, but it's pretty simple. We're having our leaders download those, and then we're running it through our ICP to say, which companies are these? What are we going after, right? Is this a good contact so that we can get those warm referrals? Because at the end of the day, right, and this actually goes back to probably the more recent meetings that I've taken, it's been because they ask a friend of mine for a meeting, right? Or they leverage their network to pull somebody into that meeting and say, hey, will you listen to this? And I tend to be a pretty open guy and happy to jump on those meetings. Caspian, you were calling me a gong.
I was. Uh,
I'm pretty open when it comes to those things, and so having those warm referrals and those connections, and so that's what we're kind of doing is reaching out, and what we're putting in place, which is actually pretty interesting, is spiffs for non like go to market folks, so like non sales and marketing. So leveraging the rest of the company to be those go to market folks and saying, hey, if you bring a qualified meeting in, or if it closes, or whatever the case is, we're going to put money in your pocket. Because at the end of the day, at Zesty, like we go after folks that are like product, DevOps. If we can turn our folks that are internal in those roles, who have friends who are in those roles, colleagues, networking events, whatever, if you can put them in the driver's seat, align the incentives correctly, then you can create an entire workforce of folks who are single-minded of, we want this to succeed. We don't want to get laid off because there's no money. We don't, we want our options, if you got equity, to mean something. So everybody get on board and get that quick win, that immediate win, that cash in your pocket to do something to help that company move forward. I think that's kind of the interesting play that we're working with right now. What about you?
Yeah, no, and firstly, I love that. For me, I know I touched on this earlier. I'm really diving deep into Boolean searches on Sales Nav, essentially like after filtering for either the companies or just the titles, honestly, that I want. Then I'm using the Boolean search to essentially drill into the technology that we integrate with or that like determines that we're a good fit, as well as common pain points, just to make sure that when I'm reaching out, ideally it is as relevant as possible. Again, both from like a technical perspective and from kind of a pain
Yeah.
point prospecting perspective as well. So that's honestly been really effective, and it's been exciting to see those results that I'm going to continue to double down on.
Absolutely, man. And it's, I think even just like leading up to the recording of this, you and I had been going back and forth. And one of the recommendations I would make to everybody is just ask around, ask for best practices. Because even, we would jump on these calls just trying to plan, hey, what should we talk about, whatever. And you would come to me and say, like, hey, this is something that we've tried and it's worked really well. And it's, a new thing to me. And I'm sharing with you some of the things that we're doing, best practices. And so the more that you're talking to folks at different companies at different levels, you're a BDR, talk to your AE. If you're an AE, please talk to your BDR because,
That
exactly. Everybody is at a different skill level, and there's all kinds of stuff that's coming out, and there's different people that are talking on LinkedIn. And, you can't take everybody as an expert that they've done it and whatever, but it's always worthwhile to take a listen, give it a try, see if it works for you, and set it up in a measured experiment that says, I'm going to do this for X amount of time in X amount of ways with X amount of people. And then we're going to, change a variable and do this, do this, do this. At the end of the day, we're A/B testing this podcast right here. We're students of the game. We're experimentation. And so it's one of those things. My ask to you folks is, let us know what sucks. Let us know what's great. Please give us feedback, right? As sales folks, we're just dying for feedback. The no is better than the left on red, right? So, this all can't be sales content, right? If you're still listening, kudos to you. Hopefully we didn't bore you to death. Hopefully we had some usable tips that you can enact. And, the real key here is like, if you're an early BDR trying to break in and try to understand, if you're an AE who is trying to fill their pipe because you're realizing that your inbounds and your BDRs or whatever the case, you're not getting enough. We really appreciate all the time that you've taken with us, and we're going to continue to put more stuff out. And so, drive us to those directions. But I want to humanize us a little bit. We're not these like weird robots. And clearly I've outed myself as a, 10-year-old reading How to Win Friends and Influence People. So let's humanize us a little bit and lay down hot takes, right? So this is
mm,
Cold Rush. What's our hot takes? And these are
yeah,
totally sales unrelated.
yeah.
Want to know, what's your hot take? What's Caspian's differentiator?
Well, good question. I think I got a number of hot takes, but the one that comes to mind, non-sales related hot take, Apple cores are the best part of the Apple. I'm going to repeat this because people aren't going to believe me. Apple cores are by far the best part of the Apple. Feel free to disagree with me in the comments. I
Uh,
already know I'm right, so it's okay to be wrong publicly. If you come at me in the comments. Basically, I came from a household where if you didn't finish your apple, you couldn't have dessert, and I got a huge sweet tooth, so naturally I became like an apple fanatic. And seriously, now I will say the core is the essence of the apple. That sounds obvious, but like from a flavor profile as well. And so if it's a good apple, it's going to be a great core. And if it's a bad apple, it's going to be an awful core. But my point is, eat the core. Probably don't eat the seeds because they're poisonous. But I have eaten a couple of seeds in my day, not necessarily deliberately, but it happens. And I'm serious. Next time you eat an apple, eat the core. It'll change your life. So
is
that's
it
fine.
so you're saying I just have to dig into this. It's a flavor thing, or
It's
is
a
it a
oh,
texture thing? Is it
I mean,
a
the texture's not bad. What is nice is it's really natural, right? Like you eat the apple, then you go to the stem, and then boom, apple here. Like now the
yeah,
apple is like, if I have my chapstick, now it's like this, and you can just
yeah,
eat, then you can eat the core like that, and then you have the stem, and then you can throw away the stem. And so it's the taste, mostly taste.
yeah.
Yeah, really, the taste is incredible. It's incredible.
That is fascinating. So your parents eat the cores as
My
well?
dad eats the core. Yeah, shout out to my dad.
He's a
Uh,
core.
Dad, if you're listening, shout out to you.
He's a corer. All right.
He's hardcore.
Yeah. Favorite apple?
Changes a lot, but the jazz apples from Trader Joe's, excellent, and they're in season. I think I could be totally wrong about that, but they're still good even if they're out of season.
All right.
But what's your apple cores are the best part of the apple take?
So I feel like so my hot take is that
Mhm.
Happy Gilmore and Billy Madison are unwatchable movies. I'll say I loved them as a kid. And I have gone through like all the things that I liked, like the Jim Carrey movies. Right? I still think those are fire. And I will say there's a lot of good Sandler movies. You know,
Yeah.
you got Big Daddy, Little Nicky, whatever. But I just cannot watch those two movies. And like I know they're everybody's favorite movies and whatever, but I just don't think they hold up. And I can't watch it, refuse to watch it. It's tainted it. Now he's putting out good stuff too.
Yep.
I mean, Uncut Gems was wild.
My
Like
goodness. Yeah.
he's getting into these roles. He's also doing things like Grown Ups 55,000. But yeah, it's a hill I'll die on here is that they're just not that great of movies. And I guess as a kid, I really enjoyed them. I get whatever. It is what it is.
You're gonna upset a lot of Adam Sandler movies. I will say,
I know.
yeah, I might even piggyback on that and say like, and again, don't come at me. I'm not a huge Adam Sandler fan. I don't dislike him. It's just not my main style of humor. Yeah, I mean, I feel like now I'm like, damn, I probably got a lot of hot takes. My point is,
Yeah.
um, that's interesting. I will say, I do really like Uncut Gems. Wow, such an intense movie. Like, I was on
Yeah.
edge. Never have I been more on edge to find out what the outcome was of a basketball game that already occurred like 20 years ago, you know? And if you know, you know. If you've seen
Yeah.
the movie, you know
Yeah.
what I'm referring to. If you don't, that's not going to
Yeah.
make any sense. Well, yeah, what I would say is we appreciate everyone listening. This has been episode one of 1,000, 10,000. How many are we committing to right now?
Yeah.
100,000?
I think one every second for the rest of our lives
There we
is
go. There we go. Okay, so we're already in the millions or billions, probably.
exactly.
One of a billion. Hope you like this one. You want to have a quick wrap up remarks and we'll
Yeah.
wrap things up.
Yeah, yeah. Hop into it if you got some.
Oh, I was just gonna say, yeah, we're soon. I was just gonna say thank you to everyone watching
Yeah.
and listening. If you're listening to this on Spotify, that's awesome because that means we figured out how to put this on Spotify. And we just want to say thank you. We would welcome your feedback. What did you like? What did you dislike? What were you lukewarm to? They're not all gonna be this long, or maybe they will be. We're figuring that out. And this is episode one of a billion.
And I think like and subscribe to us
Yes,
if that's
important.
available on whatever platform that you're watching this or listening to this on. And really do tell us what you want to hear. And if it's not in the comments there, right? We are on LinkedIn and we're going to be putting content out there as well. Probably a lot of these episodes are going to find their way there. So feel free to reach out, send us notes. Caspian Lukey, Eric Wiegand, from both of us, literally from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you so much for listening. Hope you learned something. and guide us. You point us in the direction and we'll shoot. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks so much, everyone. Really appreciate it.